All right, let's get started. I'll start with the Mangalacharan prayers. Om Jnana-timirandhasya Jnana-anjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupaha Kadamayham Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusate Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we dedicated the first 2 weeks to going over an orientation of the Bhagavad Gita. So today we are formally beginning the discussions on the Bhagavad Gita. And we are beginning our discussion with Bhagavad Gita, chapter 1. I want to remind all of us that the best way to learn would be to participate as much as possible. And if the participation is more from the standpoint of evaluating how the message of Bhagavad Gita can be practically applicable in our lives, that would be the most meaningful thing to do along the way. So please do ask a lot of questions, and we will save the time for question and answer at the end of the session. I also mentioned that it would be good to have the Bhagavad Gita with us, because I want to give you an experience of actually reading Bhagavad Gita as we go through these sessions, because ultimately the light needs to shine on the messages that are delivered by Srila Prabhupada, who is kindly giving us his translations and the purports. And therefore, we have to go through his words and try to digest them as much as possible. Now, of course, within a period of 30 weeks to complete the whole Bhagavad Gita is no easy task, and we cannot do justice to all the different nuances that exist within Srila Prabhupada's writings in the Bhagavad Gita. So in one sense, you can consider these sessions to be an inspiration to read further on your own, and in this way internalize your own understanding, and then apply and see what happens in your life. So I would request to have the Bhagavad Gita with you, and from time to time I will take a pause and give you time to actually read the translations. Okay. So I mentioned the chapter-wise distribution of the verses in the orientation section, and you can see the chapter 1 has 46 verses. And before going into the first verse, let's again remind ourselves of the characters that are going to be involved in the Bhagavad Gita. So we'll see the Bhagavad Gita begins with Dhritarashtra speaking to his secretary Sanjaya. So Dhritarashtra has a secretary whose name is Sanjaya. And Sanjaya is actually a disciple of Srila Vyasdev, whom we know to be the compiler of the entire Vedic literature. So because of the blessings of his spiritual master, Vyasadeva, Sanjaya has this extraordinary capacity for remote vision. So while both Dhritarashtra and Sanjaya are situated in the inner chambers of the palace in Hastinapur, Sanjaya is able to see whatever is going on in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, where the two parties, the Kauravas and the Pandavas, along with their supporters, they are all assembled to fight. And Sanjaya is able to see every single aspect of what is going on in Kurukshetra while situated in the palace with Dhritarashtra. And so Sanjaya is giving sort of like a live telecast of whatever is going on in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And we'll see the first chapter is going to begin with Dhritarashtra speaking to Sanjaya. And then we will see Duryodhana speak to his teacher, Dronacharya, who is fighting on the side of the Kauravas. And we will see then the spotlight going to Krishna and Arjuna, who are the main characters of the Bhagavad Gita. So we'll see these two characters come forth afterwards. Okay, so I just wanted to give this basic synopsis. So Bhagavad Gita begins with Dhritarashtra's inquiry. And what is that inquiry? Dharmakshetra Kurukshetra samaveta yuyutsava mamaka pandavaschaiva kim akurvata Sanjaya. So Dhritarashtra has a heart filled with anxiety. And his heart is filled with anxiety because his sons, the 100 sons, along with all the supporters, they were assembled in the battlefield. And Dhritarashtra really within his heart wants his son Duryodhana to become the ruler following him. And therefore he wants the battle to take place, the battle of Kurukshetra to take place, and he wants Duryodhana to win. And with that mindset, he's placing the question. So sometimes when we study Bhagavad Gita, there is a tendency to kind of skip over chapter 1, thinking that after all, the dialogue actually begins, the dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna actually begins with the second chapter. And the first chapter is just setting the scene, so we can just skip. But actually, we'll see in the first chapter, there's so many details that are there, which is important for us to understand even before stepping into the dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna. Because when we analyze the personalities who are involved in chapter 1, we can bring those mentalities into our forefront and try to see, am I playing the role of Dhritarashtra? Am I playing the role of Duryodhan? Am I playing the role of Arjuna in my own life? So we should be able to identify with these characters based on their thought processes, based on their mindset. And it is important for us to do that kind of self-reflection. Because first chapter begins with really bringing forth the conditioning of the hearts of these personalities. And when we are able to tap into these dark corners within the heart, then there is an opportunity for spiritual revolution to take place when we are really interested in that kind of self-enlightenment and self-discovery. So in the case of Dhritarashtra, because he is suffering from this acute condition of deep attachment for his own sons. So right in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, he is placing in these words that while assembled in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and he's also marking the quality of that battlefield as Dharmakshetra. So Dharmakshetra Kurukshetra. So Kurukshetra is known for a place of pilgrimage, and therefore it's a Dharmakshetra. It's a place where Dharma reigns. And therefore, Dhritarashtra, knowingly that he is not on the side of Dharma, he is now anxious. What's going to happen? Now, how do we know that Dhritarashtra is not on the side of Dharma? So I would encourage you to read this section, chapter 49 of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Akrura, on the instruction of Krishna, goes to Hastinapur to find out how the Pandavas are doing, and also gives a message to Dhritarashtra. Now, this is very, very important for us to understand how Dhritarashtra is very much aware that he is not doing the right thing, but he's not able to change. So let me just read some of these verses so that you can understand what is the condition of heart of Dhritarashtra. So it is expressed that the ardent affection King Dhritarashtra felt for his sons had made him act unjustly towards the Pandavas. So just before leaving, Akrura approached the king, who was seated among his friends and supporters, and related to him the message that his relatives, who are Krishna and Balaram, Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram, had sent out of friendship. And then Akrura delivers this message to Dhritarashtra, that a fool indulges in sin to maintain his life, wealth, and children and other relatives, for he thinks these things are mine. In the end, however, these very things all abandon him, leaving him frustrated. And then he says, if you act otherwise, so what is that otherwise? So he gives this advice to him, that by religiously protecting the earth, delighting your subjects with your noble character, and treating all your relatives equally, you will surely achieve success and glory. And then what was the way Dhritarashtra took it? Okay. So then he also says that if you act otherwise, however, people will condemn you in this world, and in the next life, you will enter the darkness of hell. Remain equally disposed, therefore, toward Pandu's sons and your own. So this was the message that Akrura delivered to Dhritarashtra. And listening to Akrura, this is Dhritarashtra's response. That even so gentle Akrura, because of my, he acknowledged that, okay, what you are speaking is a true words of wisdom, are true words of wisdom, but I am attached. So he's saying that even so gentle Akrura, because my unsteady heart is prejudiced by affection for my sons, these pleasing words of yours cannot remain fixed there, just as lightning cannot remain fixed in a cloud. So this section is a very beautiful introduction to Dhritarashtra's heart. So therefore now we can relate to what Dhritarashtra is saying in the first verse, that he's comparing that who are assembled on the battlefield. There is Mamaka and then there is Pandava. So there are two parties. What are the two parties? There is Mamaka. So there is Mama, Mam, and then there is Pandavas. Pandavas. So this is mine, and these are other. These are my enemies. So these are my enemies, and these are mine. So we can see that he is, because of this kind of attachment that he is carrying, his heart is filled with fear. And therefore he's saying that what did they do after assembling on the battlefield of Kurukshetra? So we will keep introducing some core messages along the way. Okay. So the core message right from the first verse that comes is this. So core message number 1 is that whenever there is attachment, there must be 4 things. One is insatiable desire. And because there is insatiable desire, because desires cannot be satisfied, there will be anger and frustration. And not only that, there will be anger and frustration, there will be continuous anxiety of losing. So therefore there will be fear, and there will be ongoing doubts in the heart. So whenever there is attachment, you should know that these 4 things will always follow. And that's what we see is happening with Dhritarashtra. And in order to console Dhritarashtra, Sanjaya speaks. So in the second verse, so please try to follow along in the Bhagavad Gita. So Sanjaya issues some comforting words here. That, O king, after looking over the army arranged in military formation by the sons of Pandu, King Duryodhana went to his teacher and spoke the following words. So Sanjay immediately understood the attached condition of Dhritarashtra's heart. So because of understanding his attached condition, he is using this word Raja. So Raja, whom he is referring to in second verse, is referring to Duryodhan. Is Duryodhan the king? No. But he is referring to Duryodhan as king, just so that he can comfort the heart of the blind Dhritarashtra, who is blind not only externally, but also blind internally. He is blinded by his own attachments, and he is not able to see things as they are. So at this point, let's take just 2 minutes to go through the verses, starting from verse number 3 to verse number 11. Okay, so 3 to 11, can you please read on your own? So let's take just 2 minutes of our time. And I would request you to read only the translation. Okay, 30 more seconds. Okay. So what happened next is that Duryodhan went straight to his teacher, who is Dronacharya. And then he tries to manipulate. So what does he speak? So he speaks that, behold, the great army of the sons of Pandu, so expertly arranged by your intelligent disciple, the son of Drupad. So Drupad, who is Draupadi's father, Draupadi is married to the Pandavas. So Draupadi's father Drupad and Dronacharya had long time rivalry. They cannot see each other eye to eye. But Dronacharya was so generous that in spite of that rivalry, he didn't hesitate to impart the lessons of archery to the son of Drupad, who was Drishtadyumna. And therefore now Duryodhan's opening speech is just to kind of incite anger in his teacher. He's saying that, look, the other side, the Pandavas' army, has been expertly arranged. By whom? By your intelligent, so he's sarcastically using these words, intelligent disciple, the son of Drupad. Look what you have done. And he's using the word, he's making sure that Dronacharya hears the name of Drupad. So in this way, he's trying to manipulate. And then he's saying, okay, let's now see how the comparison looks like between the strength of the Pandavas' army and the strength of our army. And he starts actually listing different fighters on both the sides. And then gives them false encouragements. So what do we find? So Duryodhan describes the warrior of the opposing army, and they are all Maharathas, as he is pointing out. So his own heart, Duryodhan's own heart, is actually palpitating out of fear and anxiety, because initially he thought that he's going to face just the five brothers and it's no big deal. But when he saw that there is such a big army supporters that have come, he's quite nervous. But he's also duplicitous. He's not open-hearted before his teacher. Instead of placing his real condition of the heart, he's trying to manipulate. He's trying to use empty words to incite anger. He's trying to push them into the battlefield using his diplomatic words. And we can see that that these armies that are being compared, we can see the details that are captured in Mahabharata about how the armies look like on the side of the Pandavas and the Kauravas. The Pandavas had 7 Akshauhini divisions and Kauravas had 11 Akshauhini divisions. And the commander-in-chief on the part of the Pandavas is Drishtadyumna. And for the Kauravas is Bhishma, Drona, Karna, Shalya, Duryodhana. And here are the listing of the Maharathis on both the sides. On the side of the Pandavas, so Maharathis, we have essentially 60,000 warriors led by Arjuna. And then on the side of the Kauravas, we have prominent Maharathis like Bhishma, Drona, Karna, and Ashwatthama. And then there are categories of soldiers who are called atirathis. They're as good as 10,000 warriors, like Yudhishthir, Bhima, Drishtadyumna, Ghatotkacha. They're considered to be atirathis. So in this way, you can go through all these details. The point is that this is what Duryodhana is seeing, and he is very nervous. But that's not what he is speaking. He's speaking something else, and that is called diplomatic heart. So let's analyze at this point with the core message number 2. So I'm going to just shorten it by saying core message number 2 is that whenever there is attachment, we saw led to extreme amount of fruitive desire, that insatiable desire. And this fruitive desire or fruitive mentality, when it is within the mode of passion, that leads to always impatience. So fruitive mentality in the mode of passion always leads to impatience. And that's what we see, that both in the case of Dhritarashtra as well as in the case of Duryodhan, these qualities are manifesting. And fruitive mentality in the mode of ignorance, it always leads to duplicity and manipulation tendencies or manipulative tendencies. So right now we can see both of these characteristics nicely decorating the character of both Dhritarashtra and Duryodhan. And we can also see another core message. So core message number 3 is that we can see the materialistic thinking, like what is the quality of materialistic thinking. So materialistic mindset is essentially characterized by me and mine. Janasya moho ayam aham and mameti. This is aham and this is mameti. So you can see Duryodhan is thinking like, okay, what is mine? So I have Dronacharya. I have Bhishma. I have all these different soldiers that are protecting me. And then when there is me and mine considerations, so naturally others would be belonging to the category of enemies who are not supporting my plan of sense gratification. So the Pandavas, so he's now comparing what they have, what I have. So me and mine conception leads to strong comparison mentality, which is a product of envy. And that's what is happening in the case of Duryodhan. And all of these things you can see is because in spite of the fact that Krishna was right there on the battlefield, there is gross ignorance of Krishna's position. So sometimes people ask, can you show me God? Right? So the question is that if God has come before you, would you be able to recognize God? Krishna the Supreme Personality of Godhead was there in front of all these assembled kings, but they cannot recognize Krishna's position. And because of the ignorance of Krishna, there is all these materialistic mindset. So we should look into our own heart and see how much we are carrying these kind of Duryodhan and Dhritarashtra mentality. How much portion of our life's consideration are all in terms of this me and mine calculation. So it behooves us to look into our own hearts. So after this, 12 through 19 verses, there is description of the beginning of the battle. Before that, I just don't want to forget this, that Duryodhan also mentions about his commander-in-chief, which is Bhishma Dev. So Bhishma Dev, the great grandsire of the Kuru dynasty, he is a valiant warrior, and he's fighting on the side of the Kauravas because of the obligations that we discussed last week, because of the vow he has taken to always support the ruler. So Bhishma is just an ideal personality. So because of the complex circumstances, he's fighting on the side of the Pandavas, fighting on the side of the Kauravas, and so Duryodhan also wants to make sure that yes, Bhishma Dev is also very dear to the Pandavas, and he has also a lot of affection for the Pandavas. So he didn't want Bhishma Dev to bring those affection into the picture when he is fighting this battle. And therefore he is saying in the 10th verse that our strength is immeasurable and we are perfectly protected by grandfather Bhishma, whereas the strength of the Pandavas carefully protected by Bhima is limited. So look at the comparison he's making. At the same time, he's trying to encourage Bhishma Dev, who does not need any encouragement. And the word that he uses here, aparyaptam and paryaptam, is very interesting word, or interesting choice of word, because paryaptam can mean sufficient, and therefore aparyaptam can mean insufficient. But paryaptam is used to mean immeasurable here. So paryaptam and aparyaptam can be seen as that sufficient and insufficient, or you can see it as limited and immeasurable. So Duryodhan is meaning that yes, our strength is immeasurable, aparyaptam, because of the presence of Bhishma Dev. On the other hand, the other side, it is limited, it is paryaptam. But we can also see it as that it is connoting that the strength of the Pandavas is sufficient, and in the case of the Kauravas, it is insufficient, because Krishna is not there on the side of the Kauravas. And then in the 11th verse, Duryodhan is making a point that grandfather Bhishma really takes this battle very seriously. He now turns to other warriors and says, all of you must now give full support to grandfather Bhishma as you stand at your respective strategic points of entrance into the phalanx of the army. So in this way, Duryodhan is making sure to keep his tag on every single personality, and he's trying to use his manipulative heart to bring sort of a strong sense of enthusiasm before the battle begins. And so now 12 through 19 are descriptions of the blowing of conch shells. So this we can actually understand the cultural scene there, that even before this major battle is going to be fought, there is extreme amount of culture that the two parties um, are blowing the respective conch shells, and there are many battle etiquettes getting followed. But if you look at the modern wars, there is hardly any etiquette. Just there is some missile which would be thrown all of a sudden to some country with many innocent people dying, or some bomb will be dropped, and the leaders themselves, they are just sitting in their ivory tower and giving orders. So in this way, the consideration of dharma is out of question. But at the same time, even in terms of etiquette, there is no etiquette in the modern warfare. But here we can appreciate that there is a lot of war etiquette going on. Now, even in the blowing of the conch shells, there is a lot of significant discussion that is taking place. So you can see that first the reference is made to Bhishma Dev, who blew his conch shell very loudly. And in this way, Duryodhan felt encouraged. So we'll, Kshitij, we'll get to the question answer in the end, just so that we don't interrupt the flow. So please jot down your question so that it's okay for you to write on the chat, and we'll visit it towards the end. I hope that is okay. So we can see that by Bhishma Dev's blowing his conch shell, Duryodhan received some encouragement. And then after that, there is the conch shells, the drums, bugles, trumpets, and horns were all suddenly sounded, and the combined sound was tumultuous. And then in the 14th verse, the spotlight goes to Krishna and Arjuna for the first time. So it is very clearly distinguished that both Lord Krishna and Arjuna, stationed on a great chariot drawn by white horses, sounded their transcendental conch shells. So the phrase that is used there is Divyo Shankho Pradadmato. So when it came to the conch shells of Krishna and Arjuna, Divya is used, or transcendental is used. In other words, their position in comparison to others is transcendental. And therefore, we have to understand that they are not ordinary personalities. And then the various conch shells are named, like Lord Krishna blew his conch shell called Panchajanya, Arjuna blew his, the Devadatta, and Bhima, the voracious eater and the performer of Herculean tasks, blew his terrific conch shell called Pondra. And then King Yudhishthir, the son of Kunti, blew his conch shell, the Ananta Vijaya, and Nakul and Sahadev blew the Sughosh and Manipushpaka. That great archer, the king of Kashi, the great fighter Shikhandi, Drishtadyumna, Virata, the unconquerable Satyaki, Drupad, the sons of Draupadi, and others, O king, such as the mighty armed son of Subhadra, all blew their respective conch shells. So we can see that there is this beautiful description of everyone blowing their respective conch shells, but the most importantly, Krishna and Arjuna's conch shells have been identified as transcendental. And in the 19th verse, it is spoken that the blowing of these different conch shells became uproarious, vibrating both in the sky and on the earth. It shattered the hearts of the sons of Dhritarashtra. So when the sides of the Pandavas, they blew their conch shells, it caused shattering of the heart of the sons of Dhritarashtra. So this is a sign of victory. So there are many signs of victory that we will notice. So, I mean, if you want to see it comprehensively, this is how it looks. Again, I'm here going through in a very summary form. I hope this will inspire you to go back to the purport and uncover these points yourself. So, what are the signs of victory for the Pandavas? There are 9 signs of victory in this section that have been identified. So, first is as Krishna's own personal presence that confirms the victory. So, Jayastu Panduputranam Yasham Pakshe Janardana. So, wherever there is Krishna, there must be victory. And then the goddess of fortune, wherever Krishna is present, naturally his consort, the goddess of fortune, is there. And therefore, fortune is guaranteed. And then the venue, as we mentioned, the Kurukshetra, has the significance of being a pilgrimage place, and therefore is definitely going to support those who are on the side of Dharma. And then Hanumanji was situated on Arjuna's flag. It has been categorically pointed out in verse number 20. So it is pointed out this at that time, Arjuna seated in the chariot bearing the flag marked with Hanuman. So clearly, just as Hanuman helped Lord Ram gaining victory against Ravana, so here Hanumanji sitting on Arjuna's flag is going to lead Arjuna towards victory. And then there are symbols of Vishnu. And for example, conch shell signifies that which actually supports the pious. So Vishnu holds Shankha, Chakra, Gada, and Padma. So Shankha and Padma, or conch shell and the lotus flower, are meant to protect the devotees, and Chakra and Gada are meant to destroy the miscreants, and therefore conch shell is a symbol of Vishnu, and therefore that symbol of Vishnu naturally is going to bring protection for those who are devotees. And I already mentioned that the conch shells that are described of Krishna and Arjuna, they are transcendental, signifying that they are going to emerge victorious naturally. And Bhishma's conch shell was there to pacify Duryodhan, while Pandava's side, the conch shell blowing, they shattered the hearts of the Kauravas. And the 8th point is that the chariot on which Arjuna was seated was a gift from Agni. And that chariot is capable of conquering all directions. And therefore, all these signs of victory were apparent right from the very beginning. Okay, so now comes a turning point in the first chapter. So after this whole battle scene has been described, after we went through the diplomatic hearts of Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana, then at this point, the focus is now on Arjuna. So Arjuna wanted to find out who has come to combat in the battlefield. And therefore he requests Krishna, Senayor Ubhayor Madhye Ratham Sthapaya Me Achyuta, that Krishna, please take this chariot and place in between the two armies so that I can closely inspect the opponents. So please open text number 21 and 22 verse, and you can see the word that is used to refer to Krishna is Achyuta. And Prabhupada explains what is the significance of this addressing Krishna as Achyuta or infallible. So Prabhupada is writing in the purport, although Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, out of his causeless mercy, he was engaged in the service of his friend. He never fails in his affection for his devotees, and thus he is addressed herein as infallible. So at this point, we can meditate on a very important quality of Krishna that is coming out here. So this is my core message number 5, I guess. And that is that we, as conditioned souls meaning we who are situated in the material world for a long period of time, we are used to dealing with the material world in a particular way, where we are saturated with materialistic thinking, that somehow or other, if I can be on the top, that's going to be the best thing for me. So we kind of shun away any sense of service attitude, because we want to become the master of the world. Now, if you look at Krishna, what is the foremost quality of Krishna? The foremost quality of Krishna is that he is Bhakta Vatsal. So Bhakta Vatsal means Krishna is ever ready to show his affection for his devotees, to the extent that he wants to become the servant of his own devotee. So Krishna is always looking forward to becoming the servant of his own devotee. And what extreme example can we find that Krishna is taking the role of a chariot driver? So Krishna has given the promise that he is not going to participate in the fighting, and he is taking a very menial position. So he has become a chariot driver for Arjuna. So this is a chariot driver. You can just picturize in your mind that in India, particularly, I mean, here in United States, even if you are becoming a CEO of a company, you still drive your own car. But in India, it's very common that you would be driven around by a chauffeur, and that position of a chauffeur, if you visualize, it's a very lowly position. So what kind of position that Krishna is ready to take for his devotee here? Very lowly position. So Krishna is saying, just you command me and I'm at your service. So this is the love that Krishna is ready to bestow upon us. And what is the qualification from our side? The qualification is that when we develop a service attitude, then we will find that the greatest bliss is there in that mood of service, which is not to be found when we look for becoming master of things. And that important aspect has been shown by Krishna himself, who is the source of everything, who is the summum bonum of everything that exists. And still he is taking pleasure in becoming the servant of his own devotee. So therefore, Arjuna here is requesting Krishna, who is his chariot driver, that please place this chariot in between the two armies. Okay. And then 24th verse is spoken by Sanjaya, that having thus being addressed by Arjuna, Lord Krishna drew up the fine chariot in the midst of the armies of both parties. And here is the turning point verse, which is verse number 25. And then elaboration on 25 is 26. Krishna says just 4 words. What are the 4 words he says? That Pashya, Pashyan, Pashya means to see. Pashya etan kurun iti. Pashyan etan samavetan kurun iti. So Pashya means just behold all the Kurus who are assembled here. And then Krishna elaborates on who are the parties that are assembled. So Krishna elaborates about, okay, who are assembled. There is grandfather, there are fatherly figures, there are same age groups, there is Putran, the sons, Pautran, and Prabhupada in the purport gives clarity about who these personalities are. Like, for example, the Pitrin, the fatherly figures, we have fathers, contemporaries, the teachers, the maternal uncles, the fathers-in-law. And in the same age group, there are brothers, friends, well-wishers. And then the sons, there are 5 sons of Draupadi, then Abhimanyu, who is the son of Subhadra. And then there's Lakshman, who is the son of Duryodhana. And then there are grandsons who are Lakshman's sons. So Arjuna, in this way, you can see that he could see a wide variety of friends and relatives. And that's what is being pointed out in 1.26. And 27, it is pointed out that when the son of Kunti, Arjuna, saw all these different grades of friends and relatives, he became overwhelmed with compassion. So this is very interesting. At this point, we can compare the heart of Duryodhana and the heart of Arjuna. So in the case of Duryodhana, you saw how diplomatically he was trying to manipulate his elders. He was trying to see how his own members can lay down their lives for his sake. And he's basically not caring about them. He's just caring about his own desires, and he wants to make them serve him. And he's evaluating the other party as enemies, and carrying a strong sense of inimical tendencies. But in the case of Arjuna, actually there are feelings of compassion towards both the sides, and that is what is exemplary and stark in this whole description. So Arjuna is carefully looking at all these sides and filling his heart with compassion. So now, at this point, you can analyze this also, that so far we saw that fruitive mentality, when it was saturated with mode of passion and ignorance, led to impatience, it led to manipulative tendencies. But in the case of Arjuna, there is also some fruitive spirit, but it is in the mode of goodness. And so what we find is that the core message number 6 is that when there is fruitive mentality in goodness. So in other words, we find that this is one of the characteristic teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. As we discussed during the orientation session, when we are in this material world, We are only dealing with gunas, right? The gunas are the modes of material nature, the sattva, the rajas, and the tamas, the goodness, passion, and ignorance. And that's what is ruling the show in our life. So gunas, when they are ruling the show, yes, passion and ignorance are the lower gunas. And as long as we are operating from modes of passion and ignorance, we cannot enter into spirituality. The entry point of spirituality requires goodness, but goodness itself is not sufficient. So goodness itself, when it is evaluated through selfish lens, when it is evaluated through fruitive mentality, it would lead to still hesitation and lack of clarity. And that's what we find in the case of Arjuna. So Arjuna was also operating from the mode of goodness. I mean, he was also operating from within the modes. But he is operating from within the modes because he was induced into bewilderment, induced into the state of bewilderment when Krishna issued these words. So Krishna induced bewilderment in Arjuna. So after Krishna induced bewilderment in Arjuna, Arjuna is acting like a conditioned soul and yet manifesting the qualities of goodness primarily. So there is tinge of passion going on. So there is no pure goodness, but there is tinge of passion, and therefore fruitive mentality is getting reflected through goodness. And therefore there is hesitation, there is lack of clarity that we find in Arjuna. So Arjuna opens his heart before Krishna. So let's take 2 minutes to go through individually how Arjuna is reflecting. So if you can just read 27 through 31. Let's just take 1 minute, not 2 minutes. Okay. So what do we find in this section? So what we find is that Arjuna is now overwhelmed with compassion. And at the same time, he's also overwhelmed with a lot of other feelings too. So Arjuna is very openly placing his situation before Krishna. What Duryodhana could not do. Duryodhana, because he could not open his heart before his teacher, he remained suffering internally. But in the case of Arjuna, Arjuna is also suffering. He's also going through this whole analysis. When he's seeing all these relatives assembled before him, he's unable to think, how am I going to fight this battle? They're my relatives. They're my uncles. So in this way, there is processing of me and mine also going on in Arjuna. But the processing is in the mode of goodness. He's having compassion. And also there is some tinge of passion. But all of these things are happening under the bewilderment of Krishna. So Arjuna is describing his situation that drishtva imam swajanam Krishna yuyutsam samupastitam sidanti mama gatrani mukham cha parishushyati. That seeing my friends and relatives present before me in such a fighting spirit, I feel the limbs of my body quivering and my mouth is drying up. So whatever is inside shows up outside. through bodily symptoms. So because Arjuna is filled with, you can say, depressing feelings. So therefore, that feeling is coming out through bodily symptoms. So it's describing, my whole body is trembling. My hair is standing on end. My bow Gandiva is slipping from my hands. And my skin is burning. So this is the first reason. So there are, overall, we will study, there will be 5 reasoning that Arjuna gives in this section, and then some more coming in the first chapter, in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So the first set of reasoning is related to how out of his own compassion he's feeling these bodily symptoms that is described in this 27 through 29 verses. And then he's also processing that he is seeing only causes of misfortune in verse number 30. And he's also saying that I do not see how any good can come from killing my own kinsman. Nor can I, my dear Krishna, desire any subsequent victory, kingdom, or happiness. So what is the processing here? The processing is that if everyone will die, then how can I enjoy? It's like going on vacation alone. So if I'm the only one with just a few members left behind, how am I going to enjoy life? So this particular consideration is a bit selfish consideration, where he's thinking about his own material happiness. So this his own material discomfort. So this is selfish consideration. And then in verse number 32 through 35, he is addressing Krishna as Govinda, sort of sarcastically. So he's saying that of what avail to us, O Govinda, are a kingdom, happiness, or even life itself, when all those for whom we may desire them are now arrayed on this battlefield? And therefore he is saying that I'm not prepared to fight with them, even in exchange for the 3 words, let alone this earth. So Prabhupada is explaining in that purport, very, very important purport, the 32 through 35. I'll just read a little bit of portion where Prabhupada is writing. Arjuna has addressed Lord Krishna as Govinda because Krishna is the object of all pleasures for cows and the senses. By using this significant word, Arjuna indicates that Krishna should understand what will satisfy Arjuna's senses. But Govinda, here is a crucial point, but Govinda is not meant for satisfying our senses. If we try to satisfy the senses of Govinda, however, then automatically our own senses are satisfied. And that is the principle that will follow eventually in the Bhagavad Gita. But at this point, Arjuna is complaining that you are known as Govinda, who is supposed to fulfill or supposed to give happiness to the senses. But I don't see any happy condition here. After killing all these people, then nothing will be left for me to enjoy with. So after speaking these, then Arjuna goes into a little bit of, you can say, dharmic thinking. So Arjuna is drawing all these considerations from Dharmakshastras and Arthashastras. So Arjuna is applying his intelligence thoroughly here in trying to understand whether it is really good for him to fight this battle. So this is a sign of intelligence and thoughtfulness. He's not ready to just capriciously jump into something that he's not fully convinced about. But the good thing is that he is opening his heart to Krishna. And this is the foremost quality of Arjuna that is helping him out, which Duryodhana could not do. So we, in our case also, we need to have a guide in our life. We need to have someone to open our heart to, because from time to time, life throws very interesting challenges. So if we do not have any channel for opening our heart, it can become very difficult. So here in the 36th verse, Arjuna is saying, after killing all of these opposite parties, we will incur sin. So he is fearful of sinful reaction. So he's saying sin will overcome us if we slay such aggressors. So in this purport also, it is mentioned that the 6 kinds of aggressors, it's perfectly fine to kill them. And therefore, from that standpoint, killing these aggressors technically should not bring any sin. But Arjuna is considering nevertheless. So he's saying that therefore it is not proper for us to kill the sons of Dhritarashtra and our friends. And then he say, what should we gain? And how could we be happy by killing all our kinsmen? Because if we are engaged in sin, so this is a very important point, sin naturally leads to misery. So if we want to have a happy life, we have to get rid of sin from our life. All right. And then the next sequence of reasoning comes in terms of the fear that he's carrying of the destruction of family traditions. So when the battle is going to take place, it's not going to spare even the elderly members. And then when the elderly members are gone, then there will be loss of family traditions. And then what happens when there is a loss of family traditions? This whole analysis is done by Arjuna. So before we go there, so I just want to mention that I'm going to share these slides later on, like last time. There is a very detailed mentioning of the symptoms of compassion, symptoms of bodily compassion that Arjuna was experiencing. And because of which he was getting utterly confused about what he should be doing. And you can go over those symptoms in detail and side by side study the purports corresponding to those symptoms. That would help your understanding further. So this is the sequence in which Arjuna is laying down his logic that the elderly members, they are responsible for the purifying processes in the family from birth to death. And the death of elderly members will stop that purification process. And therefore, the younger generations will become irreligious. And therefore, they will lose the chance for spiritual salvation. And then when the younger members become irreligious, clearly the irreligion will become prominent in the family. And the first point of attack of that is going to be women and children. Because women, like children, also need protection. And good population depends on faithfulness and chastity of women as far as Vedic standard is concerned. So Arjuna is analyzing when women become polluted, then that would give rise to unwanted progeny or Varna Sankara. And then when there is unwanted progeny, then that would lead to further unwanted war and pestilence. And then overall, it would be leading to degradation of society. And there will be hellish condition for everyone. And so this whole analysis is based on what Arjuna heard from the Dharmakshetra. And therefore his conclusion is those who destroy family tradition, they dwell in hell. And that's what he speaks in the 43rd verse. And you can, when it comes to dharma, I mean, dharma can be seen as paradharma and aparadharma. In other words, there is constitutional duties of the soul, and then there is the conditional duties which are in terms of our body in this material world. So we'll analyze these things later, but here I just want to point out when it comes to dharma, it's a very complicated subject matter, and there are so many varieties of dharma that one has to deal with when one is living in this material world. And Arjuna is conscious of every single of them while he's analyzing the situation. And then according to Manusmriti, there are all these sanskaras, like 16 primary or major sanskaras that one should be performing. And the point is that all these sanskaras that are established by the tradition, because of the presence of the elderly members, they will get lost. And that's what Arjuna is analyzing. And then we discussed this, that Arjuna is fearful of sinful reaction. And then as a result of all of this analysis, so far Arjuna has given 4 reasoning. The first reasoning, I mean, the first reasoning is more in terms of his own expression of how he's feeling in terms of his body, that he was feeling acute compassion for the relatives and friends who are assembled on the battlefield. So this compassion is clearly in terms of his bodily affection. So it is a materialistic plane of compassion, but it's still a feeling of compassion that is there. And secondly, he's also evaluating, what will I gain at the end? If everyone is killed, whom am I going to enjoy the kingdom with? So therefore, he's evaluating in terms of material happiness. The third reasoning and fourth reasoning are more analyzing in terms of the Dharma Shastras. So he's saying that I'm going to incur sinful reactions upon killing so many. And fourthly, what about these traditions getting lost and then finally leading to the destruction of the whole social values? And it's essentially the breaking of the whole Varnashrama system. That's what is going to take place. So why should I fight? I should not fight. So in the 46th verse, he cast aside his bow and arrow and sat down on the chariot. So this is Arjuna literally quitting, saying that I'm not going to fight. So he's saying that that having thus spoken on the battlefield, cast aside his bow and arrows and sat down on the chariot, his mind overwhelmed with grief. So here we bring the core concept number 7. So the core concept number 7, is it 7 or 8? Okay, let's say 7. Okay. So the core concept number 7 is that ultimately looking for solution in material space is like looking for solution in a null set. In other words, we may be very, very advanced in materialistic analysis. So materialistic analysis in itself cannot solve your problem. It would not lead to ultimate solution. You need to bring in the spiritual portion of our existential reality into consideration. If so, in the case of Arjuna, he was applying like all these ideas that he has learned through the Vedic system. He's applying his Vedic education fully, but at the end, it is resulting in confusion because he has still not evaluated in terms of spiritual consideration. The spiritual consideration is completely missing. And what is that spiritual consideration? What does Krishna want from me? So he has analyzed and he has decided that I'm not going to fight. He has just decided, right? But he also carries a strong sense of integrity. And that integrity is what is protecting Arjuna, that he is very open. So his integrity of heart, that he is open to Krishna, open to hearing from Krishna. He's very open. And that is going to save Arjuna. And here is the core concept number 8. And that is that in order to enter into a realm of clarity or to even begin our spiritual journey, we need to be inherently good. So we have to cultivate qualities of goodness. We have to frame our life. We have to frame our life in qualities of goodness. We have to frame our life in qualities of goodness. If we are very evil-minded and diplomatic and always trying to figure out how to kind of manipulate matter to our advantage, how to exploit, when we are carrying these exploitative tendencies, then the spiritual subject matters would not really sink in. So we would stay far away from spiritual conceptions of life. So it is very important that we gradually move in the direction of embracing the qualities of goodness. And we can see in the case of Arjuna, the saintly qualities of Arjuna were characterized in so many places. Like in 28th verse is very clearly shown how he's soft-hearted. All these are there in the purports. So again, like this is my nudging you in the direction of reading further. And I mentioned that he does not want to even kill for the exchange of the three worlds, and he was ready to even forgive any aggressors, although there is actually no reaction in killing them. And then he was ready to consider the evil consequences, even at the risk of refusing obligation to fight. And he's also very, very consciously trying to see how he can protect the family traditions and values. And in fact, in 45th verse, he's saying that I'm ready to be killed unarmed and not even retaliating. So overall, this is the conclusion that Prabhupada gives in the 46th purport, which is the last verse of this chapter, that such a kind and soft-hearted person is fit to receive self-knowledge. And therefore, we should try to cultivate this quality in our life. And another reference I wanted to give is that there are different names of Krishna, Arjuna, particularly that comes in this particular chapter. And each of those names is contextually significant. So here I'm just summarizing this, but if you read the purport, you will be able to go through it. Again, I'm going to share these slides so that you can refer them and try to deepen your understanding. All right. So thank you very much for today. And I want to see now what questions I can address. Let me go through the chat message because I know there was one question. So Kshitij, you asked, since a lot of people are on Dhritarashtra's side, they do not automatically become bad, even though Dhritarashtra have wrong motives, because they are just doing their duty. You can say that yes, there are many of the fighters, they were fighting on the basis of their obligations. And that is why when you are just fighting under obligation, you are definitely in some sense acting under some principles of dharma. By the same time, if the choice is there, to be on the side of dharma versus adharma, then it is the responsibility of the individual to see which side that they want to belong to. So therefore, what I'm trying to say is that it is dependent on a case-by-case basis. when they are choosing to take the side of adharma, one has to be ready to also bear the consequences. So that's all we can say here. Is that okay, Kshitij? Kshitij, you would have to unmute yourself. Kshitij, you are still muted. Are you not able to unmute? Okay, now you're unmute.
My microphone is not working, I guess.
But now it's working. I can hear you.
Okay.
You were
Yeah,
just
that is-
unmuted. You were just muted before. Yeah. Okay. I see that. Yes, it's okay. Okay. Next question is from Pratik. Okay. Nice to see you, Pratik, after a long time. If you don't mind, please turn on your video so that I can see you also.
Thank you.
Why did Pandavas suffer major casualties such as death of Abhimanyu and death of the 5 sons of Draupadi at the hands of Ashwatthama, even though Krishna and other positive forces were on their side? Very nice question. So the point is that as long as we are living in this material world, we have to live with the conditions of this material world. One has to deal with the circumstances. The main thing that we have to understand is that the protection that comes from the Supreme Lord has many different levels. It's not just physical level, you know. So many different levels in the sense that when you are facing with a very, very challenging circumstances that you cannot even explain, right? What do? You have now a wealth of wisdom that is coming from the Supreme Lord to face very, very difficult circumstances of life. So success does not necessarily mean always kind of riding the waves of success, what we call as success. But success also means to be able to go from one phase of failure to another phase without losing hope. In fact, when we are spiritually strong, that gives us that resilience of the mind. The resilience of the mind to bounce back is the quality of maturity in spiritual life. So in the case of Arjuna, for example, who lost his son in the battlefield, and then that too in a very crafty way, like this whole Chakravyuh that was formed, and Abhimanyu was killed in a really, really crafty way. So when Arjuna lost, he did not lose the enthusiasm to carry forward Krishna's instructions. And he did not lose the mood of devotional service either. So that is the success. So we have to understand that the circumstances of the material world, they are going to keep challenging us. And these are great devotees of the Lord, or the greatest devotees of the Lord. So as much as they are subjected to all these different tribulations, simultaneously they were also receiving a lot of internal wisdom to face them. And another important aspect is that this why question, right, is a very complicated question. Because as I was describing in the orientation, right, every individual is like, when we look at just this from a myopic lens, just looking at this particular life, it may look to be just a very short span of, or short window of observations that we are making. But if you look at the overall continuum or the journey of the soul, there's a lot going on, and we do not have access to those details. So why something is happening, it's just impossible for us to answer these questions, you know?
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Right. Thank you for the question. Preeti ji, you would have to unmute yourself.
Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna. Please ask your question. I see your hand raised. Your hand.
Did you? No, I think by mistake it must
Oh,
have
okay.
happened.
No problem. No problem. Okay. I thought you had a question. Okay. No problem.
Sorry.
Any other
Lower
question?
Right now, no. Thank you. But I would definitely ask you, can you add me in your WhatsApp group if you have any?
Oh, I had been just emailing. I do not have
Oh,
any
okay.
WhatsApp group.
Okay, because
But
I think maybe your email must have gone into junk. So I didn't have any this morning. So now I
yeah.
got it.
So it seems like my emails are all going into spam folders. That's what I heard from Satwat.
Oh,
Just let me know. So please check your spam folder.
yeah,
I have been.
I will definitely. And otherwise, I will ask Gagan to send me the Zoom. Or otherwise, will the Zoom link will remain same, or you will be changing it?
No, it's the same Zoom link for all the sessions.
Same. Okay, the next
Yeah.
Sunday I can try the same one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other question?
I just posted one in the
Okay.
chat.
Another question. Okay. When Krishna is serving, Arjuna is on receiving end, who is already a higher soul. But in general, we know that people would mistreat a service attitude. Okay, so what you're saying is that if Krishna is taking the same position for another person, that person can take advantage. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
just
I
want
mean, yeah, it's a quality, like you said, the service quality is very important. But in general,
Okay.
yeah,
So when in general, when we are in this world, right, whether when we are dealing with service attitude, we will be subjected to exploitation by others and become more and more vulnerable. That's the question you're asking, correct? Okay. So the point is that when we are on the side of dharma, when we are ourselves very principle based and taking shelter of Krishna, we should always know that there is a principle called dharma rakshati rakshataha. One who takes shelter of dharma, dharma in turn protects that person. So you can see dharma like this, if so dharma is like you can say raincoat. So if you take care of the raincoat, okay, so then that same raincoat at the time of rain is going to protect you. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is that so we have to develop that conviction that no matter what, if we are always in the mood of service to the Supreme Lord, I will get the internal intelligence from the Supreme Lord how to act properly in this material world, because circumstances are varied in this world, and many times we don't know actually what is the right course of action, and at that time we should be willing to take some guidance. We should be willing to discuss. I don't know what to do. So Krishna says in the 10th chapter that Tesham Satata Yuktanam Bhajatam Priti Purvakam Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam Yena Mamupayantite. That one who is acting always in relationship with the Supreme Lord, Krishna gives intelligence from within how to act properly. So in other words, acting out of service attitude does not mean that we subject ourselves to exploitation. It also means to act with intelligence, but internally the consciousness does not change. If suppose somebody is acting very, you can say, unjustly towards you, or that person, maybe, I don't know, like in company circumstances, there could be many interesting political environment that may get created, and you can become the center of that politics. So all these circumstances can happen, and it's very common in this material world. So from our heart, when we are properly devotionally situated, we become well-wishers even of those who may not be acting properly towards us. So we may actually even go to Krishna and try to pray that Krishna please help them, like they are definitely dealing with some internal weakness of their own heart, because of which they're acting like this. So in this way, our whole consciousness actually goes through a transformation in how we look at things, and when we are always taking shelter of the Supreme Lord, we will see the situations change in magical ways, and sometimes we can also become an instrument of transformation if Krishna so desires. So when we are always taking the side of dharma is going to protect us, and dharma is going to protect the whole circumstance, and that is guaranteed. But how to exactly act, those details one may sometimes need to take guidance on, because it is possible that we may not know exactly how to act. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
These are very nice questions, by the way. All right, so I think in the interest of time, we can close today's session. So thank you all very much. I'm really grateful to you for joining today. And I'm going to share both the recording as well as the slides as I've been doing so. Okay. And recordings will be automatically going into the same playlist that I have shared. So if you want to refer back, it's there. Okay. Okay. Gagandip, Taji, please go ahead.
Hare
Krishna.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for joining.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much.